Hey, world history students. Today we are going to be talking about World War II and specifically the events that led to World War II. So, how people came to power, what things contributed to it, and what led to this huge destructive um, war that led to the deaths of millions and millions of people. So, let's take a look at the causes. Well, we can't talk about World War II unless we talk about, of course, a guy named Adolf Hitler. So real quickly, let's give you some background information on him. Believe it or not, Hitler, as a youth, was born not in Germany, but Austria, and his primary objective was to be an artist. And he's actually pretty good. But unfortunately for him, he applied to art school in Vienna, in Austria, and was rejected. Um, this was a deciding moment. It's one of those big what ifs in history. Had he been accepted to art school, how would that have changed world history? It's something obviously we'll never know, but fairly interesting. Just to give you a reference, this is a piece of his artwork during that time. Pretty impressive, honestly. But unfortunately, not good enough to get into art school in Vienna. So instead, he decides to join the army, all right, and rise his way up through the military ranks. He didn't come from money in Austria, and so he saw the military, very similar to Napoleon, as a way to rise up through the system and make a name for himself. He joins the German army and enlists during the time of World War One, and he was seen as a hero. He was seen as a hero during World War One. Decorated 5 times, meaning that he received 5 different medals for his acts of heroism as a soldier. So he rose up the ranks militarily in the German army during World War One. It was during World War One that he gained a lot of his ideas and saw a lot of the problems that existed in Germany, because he realized that the German army was pretty strong, and the German people and the country in general were very strong. But he saw some problems that led to their downfall. He couldn't understand why Germans let certain people hold them back. And we're going to see that that's going to play a big part in his rise to power and how he scapegoats certain groups and tries to build up Germans as this great race. And we'll talk about that more in just a minute. But after he gets out of the war, he joins a local group known as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which will become known as the Nazi Party. This was a right-wing group, very extreme, and sought to fix the problems that led to the downfall of the German Empire in World War One. Hitler very quickly was seen as a very good orator. He spoke very well and could really take hold of the crowd and a group of people that was listening to him. And so, for that reason, not necessarily because of his brilliant strategies or things of that nature, but because he was such a good speaker, people flocked to him. He was very charismatic in that sense, very forceful. If you've seen videos of him speaking, he speaks very forcefully and rallies people, gets their energy going very well. And so he was the face of the Nazi Party. There are many others that really pulled the strings behind the scenes, but he was the outspoken leader, the face of the party. One thing that he did, he tried to take control forcefully of the German government. He did this by attempting to assassinate and take over the German government itself, which at that time was the Weimar Republic. And he did this by force with several different other members of the Nazi Party. Unfortunately, he was apprehended and arrested and sent to prison. And it's in prison where he writes his famous book and lays out his thoughts in a book known as Mein Kampf. This we're going to talk more about in just a minute, but it lays out his ideas of what the problems in Germany are and how to fix them and who he blames for the problems. All right. Now, during that time, as we learned about last unit, there was a huge depression all around the world after the stock market crash. So in the 30s, Germany was one of the main ones hit hardest by the depression. And we know that when things go poorly, all right, you tend to blame the government and you want to change. And oftentimes that's when, very extreme leaders come to power. And that's how the Nazi Party is going to gain a huge following. They're going to say that the democracy has failed you. All right, just look at all the problems going on from the Depression, and look to us as the alternative, how to solve the issue. And so their supporters are going to soar. As you see here, they go from 800,000 to 6.4 million people. And so there's going to be a lot of support for this new wave of government. All right, it's no longer supporting democracy, but more extreme measures, and Hitler is the face of that. All right. Now, eventually, in the next upcoming election, many of the Nazi members would gain seats in government, and Hitler, in particular, is going to be named by the chancellor, by the president in Germany as chancellor, which is the second in command, kind of like the vice president. And after 1934, the president himself dies, and that leaves Hitler to rise to power. So in 1934, Hitler finally gains power and control of all of Germany. And his first move was to take out his political enemies, all right, known as the Night of the Long Knives, where he hires militia as secret police to go out and assassinate key political opponents. So someone who would make it hard for him to get things accomplished in Germany, he goes out and actually assassinates them. And this Night of the Long Knives, as is known, or Kristallnacht, is one of the most telling things and a sign of things to come. So let's take a look real quick at his ideology. So Hitler's ideology is laid out in his main book, which is known as Mein Kampf. This is his manifesto, basically what he believes in, and he believes that Germans, specifically blonde-haired, blue-eyed Germans, are a perfect master race. Right? It goes into that what we talked about in last unit with the social Darwinism, that somehow some races are more evolved than others. Well, he believed that this blonde-haired, blue-eyed German race, or Aryan race, which is made up, is somehow the master race and the best of the best, so to speak. Okay, everybody else is inferior and needs to be eliminated. And so ideally in Hitler's world, it would only be blonde-haired, blue-eyed German. I know what you're thinking, right? Hitler himself is not blonde-haired, blue-eyed, or even German, right? He's Austrian. So, how does he believe this Aryan race? Well, this is, again, not something that's entirely based in fact and what he actually understands. He believes that he is, doing what is best for not only Germany, but the world. He also sees Jews as the main scapegoat or the problem. Not only Jews, but other minority groups, gypsies, Poles, people from Eastern European countries. He sees them as, racially inferior, and therefore that's what caused Germany to fail in World War I and all the problems that led to the Great Depression. So he's blaming them, right? It's not you, the rest of the Germans. It's got to be, the Jews who are not the Aryan master race. He also talked about how bad the Treaty of Versailles was, and we know that this is something that really punished Germany and led to huge, widespread German hatred and dislike of the people who imposed the Treaty of Versailles, namely Britain, France, the United States, and Russia. So these countries are going to be seen as his main enemies. He also laid out his plan for Germany, and the problem with Germany is because of the Treaty of Versailles, they got their land taken away, that they needed more land, not only for more land in the country, but more living space to spread out. They also needed more resources that Eastern Europe and Russia could provide. So he wanted to basically expand Germany militarily and for economic reasons as well. So that was his main idea of Mein Kampf. So let's take a look at the bigger picture for a minute and look at how imperialism led to the rise of World War II. So some other key players in imperialism during this time was Japan. Japan was very similar to Italy and Germany. Those three would be key allies with one another, but they all had very ambitious goals of taking over mineral-rich regions. All right, so Japan is going to be the first one to take Manchuria region of China. So they've already taken over Korea. They see themselves as the master race in Asia and better the Chinese and the Koreans, and therefore they they're better militarily, economically, so they take over this region of China, impose their will, take over raw materials for their factories. Italy's going to try to do the same thing in Africa. They invade Ethiopia and try to take their resources there. And so you're seeing a growing involvement with both these two countries in the same realm as Germany in taking over new lands. Now, Germany won't be able to form as many new colonies elsewhere because of the Treaty of Versailles that limits how much land that they're going to take. But we're going to see Hitler's going to try to get around this. And he calls his new empire the Third Reich, or the Third Reign. And this basically just means that he is planning on rebuilding Germany and restoring it to a worldwide power. He plans on having, obviously, more colonies around the world and build up Germany to its former glory before World War I. So he's going to see that Japan and Italy are going to be very similar militarily and also ambition-wise. Mussolini is a fascist leader that kind of shows Hitler how to lead in a fascist sense. And so that's going to be his key ally there in Europe is Mussolini. And he's also going to see Emperor Tojo is going to be his main ally in Asia. So Japan's leader Tojo is going to join a group with Hitler and Mussolini. So all three of those, Japan, Germany, and Italy, are going to make up your Axis powers. And they start grabbing land and building their empire and being very aggressive about doing so. All right. So Hitler's going to try to break away from the Treaty of Versailles, which said you cannot take over any more land. It took a lot of the Germans' lands away. And so Hitler's going to ask for more land back and say, we've gone through this depression. We need more land. These people that live here are German. We need this land back. And so he's going to start taking land away. Now, this is going to scare people around the world, especially Britain and France, who saw what happened in World War I. They said, we don't want to start another huge war like this. So, at first, they're going to be kind of, hesitant about stopping Hitler from taking this land back. So let's see what goes on. All right, here real quick, you can see, what's going on. Italy's taking over not only Libya, but also the coast here and taking over more and more land away in Africa. All right, we talked about that last unit, the scramble for Africa. Well, Italy's trying to get involved there. And in Asia, Japan's already got Korea, and now they've invaded Manchuria region of China. They've killed a lot of Chinese in order to take this land, executed a lot of them, and as well as Taiwan. So they're gaining a lot of ground here in Asia for their factories for economic reasons as well. All right, so Germany, how do they expand? Well, Hitler states that they need this land back for different reasons. Number one, Germans already lived there. They want that land that was taken away from the Treaty of Versailles. They want that land back. And so France and Great Britain are going to be hesitant. They don't want to do anything because they know that this could easily set off Hitler and start an even bigger war, very similar to World War I. They do not want that. All right. So their plan is to appease him. So basically they say, okay, Hitler, you can have some of this land back. We're going to give you the Rhine land and the Sudeten land in Czechoslovakia in the Munich conference. But they said, if you take anything else, they draw a line in the sand. If you invade any more land, then we are going to war. All right. And Hitler says, okay, great. All right. This is, no problem at all. That's going to be, just what we need. We don't need any more. We'll take this land and be just happy with it. Don't worry. All right. And the whole time, he's got his fingers crossed behind his back in this picture. So Britain's Prime Minister Chamberlain thinks that he's achieved peace with Hitler and saved Europe. But we know that that's not really going to happen, of course. All right. Also, this period of appeasement also has a backroom deal behind it. So a guy named Stalin, we've talked about already, in the Soviet Union, and Hitler have a behind the scenes meeting and sign what they call a non-aggression pact. Stalin is told by Hitler that he is already going to plan to break the Munich Conference agreement and invade this land over here in Poland, which they said, again, if you invade Poland, then we're going to war. Well, Hitler tells Stalin ahead of time and says, if we invade Poland, right, and you don't go to war with us, right, and don't invade and fight against Germany, then the Soviet Union can have half of Poland. We'll split it with you 50-50. And this non-aggression pact is seen as a backroom deal between Stalin and Hitler, and allows Hitler, basically buy some time that he doesn't have to fight the Soviet Union and can just focus on France and Great Britain. So it's a secret plan. They divide up Poland, and Hitler already knows, during this Munich Conference agreement that he's going to break that agreement that he signed with France and Great Britain. He knows that he's going to invade Poland and go back and take over most of Eastern Europe. And if they had read Hitler's Mein Kampf, they would have known that, because he talks about that Lebensraum. That's his ultimate goal, to take over Europe. All right, so here's a little cartoon kind of depicting their secret agreement. So the Soviet Union and Germany were actually allies at first because of the non-aggression pact. They weren't fighting with one another. Basically, the Soviet Union was neutral, but they do not immediately join the Allies. They signed that non-aggression pact and split up Poland 50-50. But as we said, this will start World War II. All right. So if you remember, the Munich Conference Agreement said if you took any more land, all right, then war is going to break out between Britain and France versus Germany and the Axis powers. And that's exactly what happened. Hitler knew that he was going to do this. So he invades Poland September 1st, 1939. So that's really the beginning of World War II. And he rolls out this new style of warfare nobody's seen before. It's called Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg is a very effective, lightning fast style of warfare. So think of it like football, where they say the blitz. Basically, they bring more people than you can defend, and so they throw their entire military all at once. Instead of holding some people back for defense, they just throw everybody in attack and just overwhelm them, so they take over places very quickly. Nobody's seen this before. It's very aggressive, and they're able to take over Poland within a couple weeks. All right, so this, of course, leads to Britain and France declaring war on not only Germany, but their allies, including Italy and Japan, the Axis powers. And remember that non-aggression pact that Stalin puts out, and the Soviet Union remains neutral at first. All right, so it's only Britain and France declare war after they invade Poland, because the Soviet Union was promised half of Poland in that non-aggression pact. The U.S., you might be thinking, we know that they get involved initially, are going to take a stance of isolationism. They say this is a European war, we don't need to get involved. And so, obviously something will happen later on that will get them involved. But at first, they were isolationists, as in they wanted to stay within their own realm. They did not want to get involved in European wars again. All right. So real quick, there's a timeline. Go ahead and pause and take a look at what happened, kind of the order of events there. All right, and so we know that there are two sides of this war. That's the World War II in Europe, the European theater. There's also going to be a theater in the Pacific. All right, so the main two players in the Pacific are going to be the United States and Japan are going to be fighting one another. We know this is what gets the United States involved, and that's specifically when Japan, fearing a U.S. attack, is going to preemptively, so before the U.S. does anything at all to Japan, basically attacks first at Pearl Harbor, which is located in Hawaii. It's a U.S. naval base there, and they destroy many of the ships that are carrying, some important military equipment, oil, things like that. But their main target was to destroy these aircraft carriers, which they knew are going to be extremely important to carry those, planes and warships and things of that nature, people to fight them in these islands in the Pacific. Unfortunately for Japan, they only destroyed one aircraft carrier. Most of the other ones were already out at sea. And so their kamikaze attacks, while they did kill many people, they were unsuccessful in their goal of destroying most of the aircraft carriers. And is really going to, we're going to talk about it later, but really upset Hitler. Because he did not want the U.S. getting involved, because he had enough on his plate there in Europe. But because Japan goes ahead and attacks them before the U.S. actually declares war, then this gets the U.S. involved not only in the Pacific, but it's also going to bring them into the war in Europe, because Japan's ally is Germany. All right, so Japan's going to be the aggressor there. The U.S. finally gets involved after the Pearl Harbor attack. The very next day, they declare war on Japan, and then Germany and the rest of the Axis powers as well. And they fight on the side of the allies of Great Britain and France. So now the stage is set. We have a huge world war again happening in Europe and now in the Pacific as well. And we're going to see how that plays out later on.